First, though, the government says police forces will be granted powers to put conditions on repeat protests. It comes a day after nearly 500 protesters were arrested, most for showing support for the banned group Palestine Action. Under the plan, senior officers will be able to consider the cumulative impact of previous protests, which that could mean they instruct organisers to hold events elsewhere if a site has seen repeat demonstrations. Here's what the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood has been saying.
So this is not about a ban, this is about restrictions and conditions that will enable the police to maybe put further time restrictions, move those protests to other places. The police already have powers on conditions for protests. What I will make clear in the law is cumulative disruption is in and of itself a reason to place restrictions.
With me is Ruth Ehrlich, who's head of policy and campaigns at Liberty, the human rights organisation. So what do you make of the Home Secretary's statement there?
This is just yet another example of further restrictions being brought in to restrict our right to protest. The Home Secretary herself acknowledged that the police have swathes of powers on how people can protest, where people can protest, when people can protest. And this is yet another power that is being brought in, adding to that very complex web of legislation that, in fact, makes it very difficult for the police to police protests and for protesters themselves to know how to protest safely. I
mean, I suppose what she's saying is it's not a ban on protests, and she says about restrictions and conditions, and in particular because people might have had to repeat demonstrations in a particular area, so it would mean that the police could perhaps move the demonstration to somewhere else. That would seem reasonable, wouldn't it?
So there are already vast powers which the police can use to dictate where protests can take place. And indeed, we have seen that time and time again in recent years. Over the past 5 years, we've seen two enormous pieces of legislation that have handed the police various powers and increased sentencing. So the Home Secretary has today also said that she'll be reviewing these powers, which we welcome because we think that that's a really vital part of making sure that the right to protest remains a cornerstone of our democracy, which at the moment it has been threatened in recent years.
I mean, you say the police have the power to move demonstrations. She's saying, though, that large repeated protests could leave particularly religious communities feeling unsafe, intimidated and scared to leave their homes. Do you recognise that that is an element that's happened in the last little while?
So the right to protest has to be balanced alongside other rights, and that's often a very delicate and difficult thing to do. The police have the powers to balance those rights as they should be. But what our concern is what Liberty's concern is that introducing new powers is adding on to that already very comlex landscape without achieving what it needs to do.
So in terms of the review, you mentioned that at the moment, and what are the areas that you think should be looked at in the review?
Well, so what we've seen is new powers for things like locking on to things, to slow marching, and that's resulted in people being arrested for things like having glue in their bags for their fingernails at Ascot. It's meant that people have been arrested for having a bike lock in their car when they're going camping or something completely absurd. So we want to review those powers, but also the sentences which have left people going to prison for numerous years for activities that were previously considered just a normal part of peaceful process.
Ruth Ehrlich from Liberty, thank you very much indeed for talking to us. Thank you. Russia has launched a large-scale missile and drone attack on Ukraine overnight, killing at least 5 people and damaging civilian infrastructure.